was the word of the year last year, and its frequency considerable, as you can see. And we can see the leaders of the Western world in the bottom right there doing a selfie at Nelson Mandela's funeral, which just says something about the ubiquity of a selfie, doesn't it? It's been around a while, but it used to be an elite practice. It used to be something that you needed to be wealthy and privileged to do. But basically what you're doing is messing around with props, with dogs, with settings, and with photographic conventions. And that's what we're doing now. It's just that everybody's doing it. And if you've got a learning disability, as we'd call it, if you have IDD, then, you know, if everyone's doing it, then I want to do it as well. And so there's already an argument for considering the selfie as part of the palette we've got to work with if we're supporting people with learning disabilities and enabling them to participate and be included. But I'm much more interested, I'm interested in that, but I'm all the more interested because at the Rick Centre we think that working with self-produced multimedia gives us a new set of tools with which to improve all sorts of aspects of the way in which people with a learning disability can work to improve their inclusion and take control of their lives. So we're starting with that selfie mission, how we construct our identities, affirm ourselves, a positive self-image, how we perform that, not just in our privacy of our homes, but we then spectacularly distribute that across the web. My daughter, who's in her 20s, has been tagged, I think, 2,850 times on Facebook. And believe me, that's 200, they're all different pictures. And she's produced them herself over the years. But we take it further. We call it multimedia advocacy, and we work using self-produced multimedia with people who have intellectual disabilities, and we use these tools to gain accessible information, but also to help people to communicate, organize their circles of support, and change their lives for themselves. In other words, these are self-advocacy tools. I propose that the processes and the products of the multimedia advocacy approach can be life-changing, and I want to demonstrate that by looking at some models. I'm going to just quickly start by saying, well, why are we using multimedia with people with intellectual disabilities? Well, you can see I've got a bit of a problem with the labels. I'm not saying IDD, I'm not saying cognitive. Back at home, we call it learning disability. The labels are difficult, but what we like to do is just work with these simple headings. The people we work with are people who face challenges with just organizing their thinking, with their memory, and with their communication. As a result, they're sometimes isolated, often isolated, and independence is a challenge. I've got an iPhone, and I use it for all the same things. Organize my thoughts, yes. I've got my to-do list here, I've got my diary, my memory. I stopped remembering people's names a long time ago. That's personal. But also, yeah, telephone numbers, addresses. What we're doing in 15 minutes, beep. Oh, I'm presenting at the Coleman Institute. Oh, that wasn't 15 minutes. But social connectivity as well. I use this a lot, but my kids use it a lot to connect themselves socially. And independence, well, these little mini-me's, they're our universes. You know that panic we feel when we've left it somewhere, you know. So these are the challenges that people with cognitive disabilities face. These are the tools in our pockets we all use to address these challenges. They're convenient for us, but I think that for people with cognitive disabilities, they can realize a step change in our social inclusion, in the way in which we have control of our lives. We do the research and development, all sorts of shapes and sizes. These tools are increasingly easy to use, they're increasingly affordable. We've got what we need in our pockets. We can integrate it in a way we support people. So, getting back to the title, it's Selfie Advocacy. We don't just inherit the ability to self-advocate. It's part of what we need to be taught, especially if we've got cognitive disabilities, and we've got to do what we can to empower people. These are the 4 steps of self-advocacy brought together by David Test and colleagues through reading through the literature and coming up with these 4 stages. And I'm going to use those to frame some examples of multimedia advocacy. We're going to work, we're showing work that we've produced on these easy build websites called, that however much we try and call them easy build websites, the users call them wikis. And I'm going to start with a wiki produced by AJ. AJ Choksey works at the Rick Centre, he has done for 6 years. His business card says AJ Choksey Wiki Master. And I think you'll see why. Let's roll this video, thank you.
AJ Advice 2. About me. I was born in England in August 1980. I am British Asian and live in East London. I am religions Indian or Hindu and vegetarian because I am not allowed non-veg and meat.
So you can see that every dimension of AJ's life is a button on his wiki. And you can see the extent of the material he's produced. And while you can also see the way he communicates. He speaks 3 languages, as he's just shared. But he speaks 4 really, and the 4th is visual. He manipulates images of himself in a true selfie style. And that's very much part of the way he comes across.
I do photocopy, typing, written books to library and claim duties.
And while he has some difficulty with language, it's not a problem. It's all coming across through the multiplicity of the multimedia, a rich communication. And AJ uses this to present, to share his life with people. When he first came to the Rick Centre, he was a traveller. This is one of the rights that he's...
your personal belongings safe, keep your mobile phone, wallet, keys, and also ID card out of sight.
But he's already making that journey from knowledge about himself, which we saw on the first button, to sharing his knowledge about travelling, sharing the skills he's learned, and becoming an advocate himself, becoming a leader. He's already going from stage 1 to stage 4, and his use of media is a vehicle, it's a platform he's using to take that journey, if you don't mind the cliche. Here he is. You could bring the sound down a little bit on here. So AJ's made a video of himself on each of the modes of transport he's learned to travel on. He started with a bus. When he first came to the Rick Centre, he did buses. Here he is in Poland doing a tram, and it's part of his work going there and presenting his multimedia advocacy. 2 buttons down, he's on a jet flying to Portugal to run a workshop at a self-advocacy conference by himself. And these little sequences of video that he chose to produce, and each one he sits there just looking cool, doing the selfie thing. And here I am, yeah, I'm doing plane, I'm flying to Portugal, I'm putting on a workshop. And it's great. For me, that's, you know, that's selfie advocacy on the go. Here's Shane. Now, Shane doesn't have speech, conventional speech, and he has significant developmental disabilities. He's not produced his wiki by himself. His family have done it with him. And they did it on their mobile phone. Let's look at the video again, please.
Shane, you ready for shower for Shane? Fast shower for Shane. Shower for Shane.
So we're straight in on the communication button, and Shane's showing us how he communicates. Why did his mum put this together? Well, because she wants everyone to understand Shane's communication. The family do. If you press the sound button here, it isn't Shane's voice, it's the voice of Daniel, Shane's little brother, throughout. It's a co-produced piece that self-advocates for Shane. Here's how to get Shane to do
The toys in the box, Shane.
that difficult thing, getting a teenage boy to sort out his room.
Off. In the box. Good boy.
Shane's mum needed to show people at school how to get Shane to behave.
Just before Shane was 14, we knew his transitions review was coming up. We knew this was a really important review for Shane and for us as a family, because we would be thinking and starting to plan for Shane's future. Prior to this, I was getting apprehensive and worried that people who would be involved in the planning and helping us make decisions would only be looking at pieces of paper, would only be focusing on Shane's disabilities, on things he needs help with, and not focusing on Shane as a person. First and foremost, Shane is a 15-year-old young man. He just happens to have some additional needs. And when I learned about the RIC Centre and wikis, I was really excited, because I saw, here's my opportunity to create something, to share with the people at the meeting about Shane and his life, and hopefully, through looking at the videos and photographs and analysing Shane in different settings, they would get a feel for his personality. And then the type of planning that I want for my son would happen. So I thought I would give it a go at home with Shane to teach him how to operate his wiki. And I thought it would be really good if at his review he could come and he could show his life himself. Shane. Good boy. I sit down. Shane, you ready for shower for Shane? I'll shower for Shane. Shower for Shane. Good boy. Good boy, Shane. Shane managed to stay at his annual review for 35 minutes. At key transition points in young people's life, new professionals suddenly become involved. They have never met your child. So on this occasion, new professionals not only got to see and have access to Shane's wiki and get a really good picture of him, but also to meet Shane. Prior to this, Shane wouldn't have been there. They would not have met him, and they would be making decisions purely based on pieces of paper.
Purely based on pieces of paper, but no, this time it's Shane's wiki, and it's a comprehensive piece. It covers every aspect of Shane's care, and he's co-produced it with the people closest to him. He owns it. He uses it to chair his own review meetings, as you saw. It includes stuff about how to fit the brace on Shane's leg so he doesn't get blisters and end up in hospital. It includes reports from his speech and language therapist, his music therapist, his doctor. It includes attached with the images we saw, the files, the reports, everything in Shane's life is included around his wiki. There's a top level that's accessible, rich media, meaningful to Shane. There's a next level, carefully encrypted, with all of the papers that relate to Shane, so that his family didn't have to build an extension to their house to hold them all. And as a result, they've got the wiki. And there's a little button on the wiki that says invite. When you want someone to find out something about Shane, you can invite them to go to one of the buttons by sending their email address. You can uninvite them next day. They get a read-only view. They see Shane's wiki. But if you're looking for his file about his behaviours, actually you have to get through the stuff about Shane winning the sports day last year. You have to get past the stuff where Shane shares his enthusiasm for jumping in the pool and for happy house hardcore music. So the whole three-dimensional Shane's there in his wiki. It's a super selfie. And it's self-advocacy. Isn't that lovely, the sequence of him chairing his meeting, you know? Okay, we've done research too. What we found is by using these ways of working, that the circle of support is much more thoroughly engaged. Those lines of communication reach out, just like in the design of the wiki, and everybody's beginning to talk to each other and join up healthcare with the social care, with the work of the teachers and the therapists, and with the support of the family. And similarly, the awareness of the whole person-centered planning approach is brought to life in this visual and accessible format. A substantial piece of finding there on that research. But actually the bottom research, people didn't learn a lot about ICT as a result of making the wiki. We're proud of that. That's because it really is an easy build website. It's because it was just done on the phone. It's got a little wizard in the back office that helps you do it. It's easy, it's not a geeky thing. Okay, so the communication of rights. We started with knowledge of self, knowledge of rights. Yeah? So we saw Shane engaging around his whole life and the detail of his rights to live a full and proper life and have the support he needs. The third one was being able to communicate those things. And we certainly saw that with Shane and with AJ. And the fourth one is leadership. And here's some research findings where we worked with 400 people across Europe in half a dozen different countries, and found that the main benefit people got out of wiki building was that they developed things like self-esteem, communication skills, and active citizenship. And I'm going to end looking at the leadership factor. These are job adverts for people, for wiki builders in some of the local regions, local boroughs in London, where they're beginning to recruit wiki builders. There's a network of these wikis being used, where people with intellectual disabilities are accessible, easy-read, multimedia information officers. They're being paid, they're servicing a need, and they're in employment. Here's one of them, London Borough of Camden. There's a whole portal of wikis where all that information is conveyed from the point of view of the service users, of the people with learning disabilities themselves. How's it conveyed? Well, again, with pictures shot with people's mobile phones, with digital cameras, assembled back at base with simple tablets and laptops. And here's an example of the work being done across 7 different European countries, 5 different language groups. It's leadership in action. This wiki that we're going to see is part of a whole family of wikis produced with Special Olympics athletes across Europe. This particular wiki was produced in one day's workshop by the gang on the right there. They're from 7 different countries. They produced their wiki on what they thought inclusion was. The next day they took it to the European Parliament in Brussels, and with the aid of the wiki, they told MEPs, European members of Parliament, what they thought inclusion was. And let's have a look. Could we roll the video, please? So we're looking at a family of wikis produced from by Special Olympic athletes from across Europe. They've been gathered together here. They're in all sorts of different languages, but their multimedia element helps cross those barriers. Here's the Celebrating Inclusion Wiki. Here's one in Belgium. It's already bilingual. Tells the perspective of the Belgian team. We're going to focus on Barry from Ireland. And this tells a whole story. It's starting with some selfies of Barry. He's already moving towards a leadership role. He's volunteering. He's part of the Athletes Leadership Scheme. He does stuff. He's telling us about what he does, what he likes to do. I think we've got dancing here. His dancing tour he's done. So he's starting with the knowledge of self, what he does, but he's engaged very much in his rights and his knowledge of rights. And you're going to see in a moment that he's got no problem with communicating his rights. But that was reinforced with the members of Parliament in this setting. It was reinforced with the aid of the wiki. And here's Barry telling us how it is with his 5-point plan.
My 5-point plan, number 1, please appoint a minister with responsibility for people with disabilities. Number 2, no decisions about us without us. Number 3, we like to be involved in decisions that affect us. Number 4, we want to voice our opinions on what service we need. Number 5, a chance to be involved in making policies that affect us.
He gave his 5-point plan to the Prime Minister. Maybe he's forgotten. And I love this last selfie. You know, it's like he's using the theatrical pose. He's using those same conventions, if you like, and artful ways of using photography that the carte de visites did in Victorian times. But he's using it as part of his self-advocacy, and he's done that journey. And I think that's a lovely example of how we can do this journey using new media and using the tools that we have in our pockets. Really this little circle thing here, it's starting people using multimedia advocacy, selfie advocacy, for the one-on-one communication, to get their message across, to be heard, to be understood. But it moves on. We take the journey, we start to develop the confidence to advocate for others, to, like AJ did, share the skills and knowledge we know and become self-advocates. And ultimately, there's AJ. He was with Barry at the European Parliament. He's there in the last picture. And that's a lovely cycle that shows the journey, if you like. And I'll end with this slide that just sums it up. The last bullet point there, really crucial. I haven't talked about it, but at the heart of this has been a real rigorous attention to safeguarding, to security, to privacy and consent. We had to do that because the first thing a lot of the professionals and even some of the parents said was, we can't do this stuff, it's on the web, it's dangerous. And we understand those fears with vulnerable people, but we don't want to leave people with IDD out of this equation. We've got to consider selfie advocacy alongside self-advocacy to make sure that we achieve full social inclusion. Thank you.
So that's part one. Tomorrow, Andy and the folks from AbleLink will be giving you part two of just where they are with this strategy and the use of technology. And I'm not going to try to follow that. Enid gave me a very easy way out of concluding our presentation this afternoon. She said, just talk about some of the things that you're doing. So I'm going to follow her instructions. Can we shift to mine? Yeah, thanks. I've had the very good fortune this past 6 months, really, to have been able to bring Andy together with AbleLink Technologies here in Colorado around our goal at the Westchester Institute for Human Development of making health information fully accessible and usable by people with cognitive disabilities. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about where we are in that agenda, but more to the point, you've just seen in Andy's demonstration what the power of the social media approach to enabling people to speak for themselves can achieve. And so we're looking forward to embedding everything that you've just heard in the AbleLink technology into our approach to health delivery, as well as then learning from that delivery what is most effective for the people that we're working with. So what we did in the beginning, one of the starting point for us was just to take advantage of AbleLink's technology. We're a healthcare provider. We're in the electronic health record world. We want to become recognized in terms of all the federal requirements for meeting patient-centered medical home standards of care and those kinds of things. And so we had to, when we thought about meeting those standards, we had to address the issue of, well, how are you going to get survey responses from your patients about their experience of your care and how well it met their needs. And we didn't want to just use proxies for that process, so we took an existing patient-centered survey and used AbleLink's Atlas technology and turned it into an interactive online survey through a research protocol, tried it out with about 100 of our patients at the center, and found that, yes, it was perfectly possible to take these standard surveys, put them into a smartphone, an iPad survey modality, turn them into an application that spoke to people, read the responses and read the questions and then read the choices of responses, and people could very much use that technology. But then what happened, Andy had heard about what we were doing from a mutual friend and was tasked in the UK by the National Health Service with creating something equivalent for the National Health Service, a survey methodology that allows people with learning disabilities in the UK to do the same thing. Experience healthcare in the National Health Service and then have the opportunity to give direct feedback on their experience of that care. So in working with Andy, what we did was we took advantage of his social media and other skills, and we created a survey in which we used imagery as well as voice to promote better engagement with the questions that we were interested in. But the other thing that we did is we really personalized the survey. The first survey is totally random. How did you find a doctor's visit? Did they treat you well? Not specific at all. In the UK model, you're always able to respond directly to the individual who provided care and how well they met your needs. And plus, the question that the UK people were interested in was a very simple question. Would you recommend someone like you going to see that person for whatever their healthcare role was? The other thing that we're looking at now is we wanted to make sure that our